Hey guys, so today we're doing a JZS171. That's a 1JZ-GTE VVT-i. It's going into an IS200 and it is retaining the automatic gearbox. So let's get into it. Right, so as discussed, this is a 1JZ-GTE VVT-i from a JZS171. The customer is retaining the automatic gearbox and it is plug and play into an IS200. So what are we going to do today? Well, first of all, we're going to go through the photos so you can see exactly what it looks like underneath there, the build process, all the sub harnesses that are attached to our modular harness design. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go through the testing, which involves obviously with the ignition on and with the engine actually running. So let's get into those photos and we'll be back in a second. Right, so now you've seen what it looks like. Now we're going to do is jump into the layout. And as you can see, the engine doesn't have any of the intake or whatever on. That's just because it's much easier for you guys to see everything with the intake off, because obviously it would cover everything if it was there. What we're going to do is we're going to start right here at the ECU box, go through there. We're going to make our way around the harness and as it goes along the engine like that. So starting over here, really nice and simple. We've got our two body plugs that go from the IS200. Okay, in terms of the ECU plugs, really nice and simple. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 ECU plugs that plug in there, all unique, so you can't get the wrong one in the wrong plug. Now in this case, what we've done is we've made the harness so that it is capable of working with ECUs that do have the immobilizer on. In this case, this customer does not, so this plug will just have to rest over here. But if he ever wants to sell the harness onto somebody that does have an immobilizer, that we can remove the immobilizer and this plug can be connected and the functions that are in that particular plug will work. Right then, moving along, we only have the two plugs in here. This is an automatic harness, so we don't have any blue plug in this particular case. So we only have the main plug and the other plug, which goes into the black section over there. All right, we also have the junction connector, which clips directly over there as well. So that is really nice and straightforward. We then have our MPX device. This is translating the MPX from the JZS171 to work with the IS200 cluster. So everything does work except for low oil level, because obviously the 1JZ GTEs and so on did not have a low oil level sensor built into them. All right, so that is the entire ECU box. It really is super simple. Plug in your ECU, plug in your two plugs from your IS200, plug in your two plugs there, clip this underneath there, and you are all done. Moving along from there, we're then going to have our grommet that's going to slide directly down into there, and that's really nice and straightforward. Then the harness is going to pop out over there, and the first thing that's going to come out is your igniter. So you should have one of these igniters with a 1JZ-GTE VVT-i engine, and that's going to plug directly into there. Little tip on the JZS110s and the JZS171, the tacho signal does not come from this plug, hence the reason why we're missing one wire in there. That is the tacho signal. That comes directly from the ECU in these cases. On a JZX100, that wire is populated, and that is where the tacho signal does come from. So just bear that in mind, because obviously all three of those engines have the same plug, but the JZX100 has that extra wire in there, unlike the other ones. All right, moving along there, the harness is obviously going to travel along here towards the back of the engine. Obviously, our engine is quite severely forward from what it would be normally in the car. But it's going to travel back from there, and then we have our first breakout at the end here, and this is where the gearbox and everything comes out, as well as two other sub-harnesses that I'm going to go through now. What I'm going to do is start with the gearbox section over there, so that's going to pop out, go along down, and we've got all of the connectors that are designed for the gearbox harness. So you've got your input speed sensor, so that goes in this section over here. Then the harness goes over the top of the gearbox, and then it plugs into your selector, and that's that plug over there. Then we've got at the back of the gearbox, we've got our solenoid plug there, and we've got our output speed sensor there. So those are your 4 plugs for the automatic gearbox. And obviously this section will be sort of facing like that, and those will pop out and make their way down along the gearbox over there. Next part that breaks out over there is going to be your injector sub harness. So again, nicely all labeled there for you, and that goes to all 6 of your injectors down there. Now again, we make this modular for a multitude of reasons, main ones being obviously you can then unplug all the injectors with just one plug. So if you're trying to test certain things on the engine, that's incredibly useful. But also if you guys want to change injectors, if you go with an aftermarket ECU, again, nice and simple, you can unplug this and just have a new harness for whatever injectors you decide to go with. Moving on from that, new addition to our harnesses that we've added in is an ignition plug. So a lot of guys have been asking about running the sort of Yaris Denso coils over there. Now, technically speaking, yes, you can run them with the standard ECU. So what we have done is we've added a plug for that specifically. More so, what we have done as well is we've actually added in wiring for all 6 ignition outputs if you were to change with an aftermarket ECU. So the way it works now currently is at the moment with this one, you can obviously run the Denso coils with a standard ECU if you so desire. All the wiring that's required is in the plug there for you. What we've also done is we've taken 3 wires for ignition signals 4, 5, and 6, and we've put them into unused outputs in the ECU. But if you were to change to an aftermarket ECU, we can build you a patch harness there, and then we've already got all the wires required to run 6 individual, fully sequential coils in there as well. So at the moment, that's obviously just blanked off with a plug with blanks in the back over there, but it is there for you guys if you want to upgrade, and you don't need to go and buy an entire new harness. You can literally build a patch harness, change to individual coil over plug, absolutely no problem at all. Right, so that's that section over there. Then the harness is going to move, or in this case, it would normally sort of bend around like that, where it's going to make its way there back to the ECU box. But over here, we have 2 breakouts. One is the cam sensor, which is just down in there. Hopefully you can see that over there. And the next one is your ground. So that's going to pop right over here, because on the JZ manifolds, which are right here, that's your earthing point, bolts right over there. Then it's going to move along down to here, and we're going to have quite a large breakout section over here. And this is the reason why I leave the inlet manifold off, so we can go through all of these breakouts over there. Now then, starting with the one that you can see straight away, this is your throttle sub harness plug. So that goes off to your throttle, and as you know, you've got your accelerator position sensor. So this one plugs in over here. So remember, these are going to go straight down through the middle section of the inlet manifold and pop out down the bottom. This then pops back up through and then plugs into the accelerator position sensor. And there you've got your drive-by-wire motor and your TPS connector, which obviously go down here as well. Now, this plug is equipped, if you go with an aftermarket ECU, to have an intake air temperature sensor wired up to it as well. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind again. So if you guys go with an aftermarket ECU, you can phone us up. We'll make you another one and actually include not only these wires, but also an intake air temperature sensor, so it can be fitted in the piping going up to the throttle body. Right, moving on to the next one, and that is going to be your aircon. All right, so again, that's going to go straight down through there, pop down to there, and then it's going to plug in that plug over there. Because remember, even though this is a 1JZ-GTE VVT-i, aircon pumps are pretty much exactly the same. So again, that plugs directly into there. All right, moving on to the next one now. We do have our oil sub harness again. So that plugs in over there, 6-pin DTM plug. At the moment, because standard ECU, we're only using a oil pressure switch, which is the one that goes right into there, into your housing. Now, As you can see, there are 6 wires. So again, exactly like with the ignition harness there, we have actually taken the other wires to unused pins in the ECU. For later on, if you guys want to switch to an aftermarket ECU, then you're able to spec out another sub harness that would have the ability to add in oil pressure and a temperature sensor, depending on what ECU you go for, obviously, if there's enough inputs and outputs for that particular setup. Next up, we've got our knock sensor sub harness. So again, exactly the same at the moment, standard ECU. So we're using the standard narrowband knock sensors that come on there. But again, we have obviously taken twin core shielded cables to this plug as part of the harness, which means these could be upgraded for Bosch wideband knock sensors if you change to an aftermarket ECU. So if you haven't picked up already, there's a bit of a theme going on here. The harnesses we're building new are designed later on to be changed to aftermarket ECU. Obviously, it just means you guys don't have to spend a lot of money if you want to go with aftermarket ECUs at the end of it. Right, the next thing is obviously related purely to the standard ECU, and that is going to be your fuel pressure up. So underneath here, you've got 2 vacuum solenoids. One of them is what we call the fuel pressure up. So on the GTEs, you have a fuel pressure regulator at the front here that has a vacuum hose attached to it. If you follow that vacuum hose, it's going to go underneath here and it's going to go to a vacuum solenoid, which takes its vacuum from the inlet manifold, and this plugs into that one and that controls it, okay? Next up, we have got our PRG. Now, this is obviously for sort of like emission type systems or whatever, but again, a vacuum solenoid valve that goes under your intake there. Now, they look incredibly similar in terms of the plugs, but what you'll notice is this one has a keyway on the right-hand side, the way I'm looking at the plug right now, and this one has a keyway on the left-hand side. So as you can see, they are keyed, so you cannot actually plug the wrong one into it. It looks like someone put some thought into that. Next up, we then have our power steering pressure. So again, with the JZS171, like the IS200, it uses a power steering pressure switch. So if you don't take all the power steering lines over, then obviously you need to sort this out either by getting a generic Toyota map sensor. You can plug that in there, it just gets rid of the code. But obviously we like to give you guys the option to actually run it, because the ECU does do something with that information. Obviously it's helping with idle up and so on the drive-by-wire if it detects how much pressure is in the power steering system. So best way to do that is to either get the pipes from an IS200. It's the easiest way because they share the exact same plug and the exact same pressure sensor, so you don't have to worry about that. Next up, we've got another one with a blank on here, and that is going to be for fuel pressure. So again, as per with everything else that you've seen here, we've taken these 3 particular wires to the ECU. Obviously, we've given 5 volts and sensor ground from other locations, but we have put the ability to put fuel pressure into the ECU. So remember, not with the standard ECU, but if you upgrade to an aftermarket ECU. So for now, that is blank at the moment. The customer is sticking with the standard ECU. Right, then coming up next, we've got our starter solenoid. So again, everything is labeled for you guys. So that's going to pop down there and it's going to plug directly into your starter motor over there. All right, so that's pretty much everything that comes out over there. Again, it's going to pop straight down through the hole. Now, do remember, this is a GE intake manifold. It looks a lot different from a GTE. You guys have to worry about these big, ugly things in the way. Obviously, your fuel rails are slightly different. This is all tucked away neatly underneath there like that. Right, so moving along from there, we then harness is going to wrap around over here and it's going to break out in the section over here. Quite a few sections come out here as well. So first of all, we've got our oil control valve for our VVT-i. So that's coming out there. Again, everything is labeled for you guys. Then we also have each of the individual standard coils that pop out there. So again, this is for when you run in the standard ECU, you can just plug these directly into it over there. We thought about putting them in there, but that can actually be nicely tucked away out of the way. And if you do change to aftermarket coils, again, these can just be tucked away inside there, or actually folded back and cable tied away out of the way. So this seemed to be the best way to do it at the moment. Next up is going to be our coolant temperature sensor. So that just hangs down over there, okay? And obviously it then is also on a sub harness. So again, we have the ability to add in a separate temperature sensor for a gauge. So if you guys go with an aftermarket ECU, we can change that MPX device for an analog MPX device, and we can give you the sub harness to allow you to fit a gauge temperature sensor and run it to that as well. So that is all included in that one over there. Obviously in this case, because standard ECU, because the MPX is being translated, we just need the one temperature sensor, and it goes into the water bridge at the front over there. Now, what we've also done is we've made this particular length so it can actually go around the other side, as you can see. So if the customer ever decided that he wanted to sell this on to somebody with a 2JZ-GTE VVT-i, well, it is going to work 100%, as you can see here. Even with the throttle, obviously we have the ability to make the plugs to work with the 2JZ-GTE VVT-i. So we're giving a lot of flexibility to the harness, especially with selling on when they are finished with it, because again, we see a lot of our harnesses ending up in second, third, fourth people's hands. So we will try and make it as accessible and as attractive as possible by making it cover a multitude of engines. All right. So moving and also breaking out over here is going to then be our section that goes to the O2 sensor. So again, because standard management, it needs the O2 sensor, and obviously our air bypass valve. So that's the air bypass valve solenoid that goes at the back over there. So that's where these are, and they just run along here and then plug directly into there. Moving further along down, we have the last breakout at the bottom here, and that is going to be for a few things, well, 3 things in total. You've got your crank sensor down there. We've got our 3-pin plug for the alternator. And then lastly, we've got our mass airflow sensor connector. Okay, so that's then gonna obviously plug into the mass airflow sensor, as you will see when we get to the engine running. Right, so that is the entire harness layout. Those are all the sub harnesses that are on there. We've gone through all the things that you can change if you change to an aftermarket ECU. We've shown you how flexible the harness is in terms of the ability to run it on a multitude of engines. Again, if you go with the aftermarket ECU, I must stress that you can't run this on any other engine using a 1JZ-GTE VVT-i ECU. Okay, right, so other things that needed to be added, there's pretty much only 3 wires that you need to find in your vehicle that should basically already be there. And that is going to be your main power for your alternator. So that's the one that bolts on over there, where my finger is over there. Now in my case, I'm running mine down along here, and it's plugging into the fuse box over there. So if you're a left-hand drive vehicle, this fuse box and your battery is on the other side. So again, that's a very short run just from the alternator to there. Next up is going to be your starter cable. So again, that's the one that's bolted down over there where my finger is there. That's going to run along there, and that's just going to go straight to your main positive of your battery. Nothing in between that, straight, easy run. All right. Next up is going to be your ground. So usually there's like a supporting bracket that goes along there from the cylinder, from the inlet manifold down to the block. And basically that has an earthing point on it. So you're going to take that earth straight to the negative of your battery. Now, on an IS200 or an IS300, there is actually a cable already there. So what I mean by that is, if you look at this particular cable that I've got down here on the very end, it goes straight down, bolts to the chassis. So that's your chassis ground. And then it comes straight down through there, and you can see it in my hand there, and it's got a lovely little eyelet on there, and that you can then bolt to the block. Okay, so there is actually a standard earth from your IS300 or IS200 that you can use to bolt directly to there. All right, again, you can reuse your standard IS300, IS200 starter cable because they all have straight 6-cylinder engines in them. All right, so the only one that you might have to make is your alternator cable, and that's going to depend on whether you're left or right-hand drive, how long it's going to be, because obviously your starter cable and your earth, etc., would be on the other side if you were a left-hand drive, or you'd be running it from here and then along the firewall over to your battery over there. Okay, right, so that's hopefully relatively straightforward. As I said, it's really, really easy to run. It basically comes from the ECU box, makes its way along there, pops back into the engine like that, over the top over there, and down the other side. That is the entire run of the harness. We then have a lot of sub harnesses over there that obviously fit down through there and then plug in underneath over there. So you can see there we've got our knock sensor over there. We've got our other knock sensor over there. We've got our oil pressure switch over there. We've got our aircon plug over there. We've got our starter motor plug over there. And then on your 1JZ, you'll have 2 vacuum solenoid valves around there. And that's where those other 2 plugs in. Okay. Right, so what we're going to do now is obviously I've got to get everything on, plug everything in, get it all started up and tested, and we'll be back and we'll be going through that testing with you guys. So, see you in a second. Right guys, so now we're back and we'll be doing the testing on the JZS171. As I said in the beginning, it's going to be broken up into 2 sections, one with just the ignition on and one with the engine actually running. So, let's go through exactly what we're going to be testing, then we can jump into the first part of the testing. So, first thing is immobilizer removal. In this case, not applicable because that doesn't have an immobilizer, this JZS171 ECU. Next up is going to be ambient temperature. So when I say ambient temperature, I mean the outside temperature. So we're going to make sure that is displaying on the cluster, the climate controls inside the vehicle over there. Then we're going to come back to here and we are going to look for the check engine light, the oil pressure light, and the alternator light that are going to pop up over there in red. Okay. Now then, after that, I'm going to pop over to my gear selector over here. We're going to run through the gears, and as you'll see, I've changed over to my IS300 cluster because that's going to give me all the gear position indication. So what we want to do is make sure that we're getting all the correct gears from this particular section over here. So that's going to be park, reverse, neutral, drive, 2, and L. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the OBD2 machine. We're going to make sure that this connects to the ECU. And as per usual, this is just connected straight to our vehicle. In your case, that would be the vehicle, the plug that's actually inside your plastics that would be all underneath the dash over here. Obviously, if you're left-hand drive on the other side, if you're right-hand drive, you're on this side over here. Right. Then once we've done that, what I'm going to do is, because of the fact that even if you have a manual IS200, you can actually wire in what they call the power and snow mode. Now, in a manual application, that makes no odds or sods difference. But as this is an automatic application, I'm going to make sure that the power mode and the snow mode do actually work. Because from memory, I've not looked at an auto IS200, but I can't remember if they have the power and the snow mode or whether this is only an IS300 thing. But this particular vehicle that I've got in the half cut is an IS200 manual, and I've only had to change one wire. You can see the one wire I've got in my hand there that I've deepened, and I've added the other wire into the back of the climate controls over there. And that causes the power and the snow mode to work rather than the TRC and the snow mode button, which I think is what you usually get in an IS200. Right, so once we've done that, we're going to go back into the OBD2 machine and we're going to check the fuel pump relay because we'll be there because we're also going to use the OBD2 machine to check the power and the snow mode when we press the button. You'll also see it appear on the dash as well though. You're going to see it in two places. Then we're going to, as I said, we're going to test the fuel pump relay. Now in this case, the ECU is controlling the fuel pump. So what I am going to do is I'm going to put a link in the top there for you guys for a video that I go into great detail explaining how the fuel pump systems work with Toyota and Lexus vehicles. I would highly recommend you go and watch that because it might answer a lot of questions you have when you come in to install these units. All right. Then lastly, the last two things we're going to do with the machine are, as part of the ignition test, is we're going to do the AC system. So we want to make sure, number one, that the AC magnetic clutch is turning on and activating, and we'll actually hear it in this case because it's got an AC pump on here. But we also want to make sure that when we press the AC button inside the vehicle, that it is actually communicating with the ECU. Now, in the JZS171 and the JZS110, the AC system is different. It actually has two pressure switches. So in this particular case, it's actually our MPX device that is controlling the AC. We're using the pressure input from the IS200/IS300, and obviously it's using the command from the AC button as well, and therefore it tells the ECU all the correct information to be able to work, because this one is actually still running through the ECU, but our MPX box is giving it the correct information based on our pressure switches that we supply. Okay, so that's what we're going to test with the ignition on. Then we're going to move on to actually starting the engine. Now what I'm going to do is the first test is going to be the starter circuit. So when we do the manuals, you'll see I just say, oh, I'm just turning the key to make sure it starts. With the autos, what I also do is I move it from park to reverse. I try and crank it over to show you that it's not going to start unless it's in park or neutral, to show you that the park neutral switch is wired correctly as per Toyota's setup as standard. Then what I'm going to do is once I've started it up, we're going to move over to the engine and then we're going to test the drive-by-wire. Now, do bear in mind, guys, obviously this is a 2JZ-GTE VVT-i. I'm using a 1JZ-GTE ECU. It's not an ideal combination, but it does well enough. It gets up, it idles smoothly. It lets me do all the tests that I want to do to make sure everything is working. But obviously everything's not 100% because, again, different engine size, 3 liters versus 2.5, etc., different size injectors, etc., etc. All right, so we're going to test the drive-by-wire. So basically all I'm going to do is I'm just going to rev it. Because remember, this is actually drive-by-wire on the JZS171. It's exactly the same system as the 2JZ-GTE VVT-i. Exactly the same as the 2JZ-GTE VVT-i with the ETCSI, or Electronic Throttle Control System Intelligent. The intelligent part makes it the drive-by-wire. So if you guys know with the JZS100, it has ETCS, or Electronic Throttle Control System. Unfortunately, what that actually relates to is the traction control. The actual physical throttle blade itself is still moved via a cable the old-fashioned way. Okay, it's the eye that makes it an actual drive-by-wire, what we refer to as the hybrid drive-by-wire, because this doesn't actually move the throttle plate at all, unless you get to the very last little bit, and you can hear that it moves it over there. All right. I do actually have a video on the JZS171 110 throttles, because there are quirks to them, like you can't actually rev it until it's above like sort of 30 or 40 degrees. So again, I have a video of that. I'll stick it up in the corner there so you guys can watch that as well. After that, we're going to go back to our OBD2 machine, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the oil control valve. Now, just a heads up, straight from the beginning, that's probably going to kill the engine. It normally does, so I might have to restart it afterwards. Not a big problem, but yeah, just to show me that the oil control valve is actually working and it's advancing and retarding the cam, and because it's a straight 6 rather than a V8 where I test them independently, has a tendency to kill the engine. Next up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to test the injectors one by one. Basically, I'm going to pull them out and make sure that we get a misfire every single time I pull them out. Now, these two in the middle, if I can't do these in relatively quick amount of time because they're very difficult to get to, know that I have tested them without the camera in my hand, but single-handedly, I might only be able to do the 4. I'll have a crack at it, but if I can't do it straight away, I might just move on and carry on with the next of them. Then we're going to come back over to here and we're going to make sure we're getting a rev counter signal. So we want to make sure that the rev counter signal is coming from the ECU and so on. Now, do bear in mind, I do get some questions about this. The JZS171 and the JZX110. The rev counter signal or tacho signal comes from the ECU, okay? The JZX100, it comes from the igniter. And easy way to tell is look at your igniter plug. If you've got a seal in the one particular pin out of the 10, tacho signals coming from the ECU. If you have all 10 wires populated, tacho signals coming from the igniter. Nice, easy way to test where it's going on. Right, then we're going to come back, also look at the coolant temperature, because again, that is being transmitted via MPX from the ECU, so we want to make sure that that is working. And obviously, in the beginning, when we first started up, we're going to see the battery light and the oil light go off. We're not going to see the check engine light go off because I don't have an automatic gearbox connected, so we're still going to get, I think it's 7 codes, which we'll go through in the last section, because that's what I'm going to get to is the diagnostics. I'm going to show you the codes that we've got here just to show you that they're only related to the gearbox and particularly the solenoid that's not connected. And then obviously I'm going to go through how to read codes with the machines, which is really straightforward, but there's also little knacks that you can do as well because it's a Japanese model ECU. So now that I've gone through all of that and waffled on enough, let's jump into the testing. So as we always say, it is plug and play. So you should be able to stick your key in and turn the ignition on. So let's move over to here and we want to check the ambient temperature. So you can see over there that's 15 degrees. So again, that is displaying, and as I said, that is actually reading the temperature. So that's what the temperature is currently at the moment. Moving on to the dash, we've got our check engine light, we've got our battery light, and we've got our oil pressure light over there. Okay, so as I said, this one is not applicable. You must remove that bulb. The Japanese JZS171, JZS110, they never had an oil level sensor. So there is no way of getting that to work because obviously the ECU cannot accept the signal from an oil level sensor. So do remember to remove that light. You must be gone. Okay. Right, so that's going to be that. Check engine oil pressure. Okay, gear selector. So all I'm going to do now is you can see at the moment we are in park. Okay. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to move this gear selector switch and you're going to see we're going to move through the gears. So we've got reverse, we've got neutral, we've got drive, and then we jump straight to 2 and L. Okay. So again, those are the gear positions that we have available to us on the mechanical side over here. So that's what we're looking to test as well. All right. So moving along now, we are now going to pop into our OBD2 machine over here. Now, as they take absolutely ages to load up, I have already done that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into function system select, just so you can see it's picking up as a Crown JZS. All right, so that's absolutely fine. So we'll wait that to load in there. Now, while that's busy loading, obviously next thing we want to test is the power and snow mode. So while that's busy loading up in there, I'm going to come down here to my power and snow mode switch. And as I press power mode, you can see I've got power mode displaying on the dash. I'm also going to move over to the OBD2 machine here. Let's go to power mode. There you go. So you can see ECT power mode switch is now on. I'm going to go press it again. You'll see the dash goes off, and most importantly, the ECT power mode switch goes off. Now for the next one, let's press the snow button. As I press the snow button, you'll see snow appear on the dash. And again, as per usual, we've got snow switch, and that is on over there. Let me press it again to turn it off. See the light goes off on the dash, and the snow mode goes off over there. Okay, right, so that's the power and the snow mode. Next up, we're going to test the fuel pump relay. So I want to go into the machine. want to go into active test, and you'll see it says fuel pump relay and fuel pump. You'll know why that is if you watch my video. So if you didn't watch my video, go back and watch it. It explains that for you guys. And all I'm going to do now is just, and you can hear that pump whirring away there. And then you can hear it turning off over there. So that's fantastic. Right. Next up is AC clutch. So first thing is the AC magnetic clutch relay. I'm going to activate. Sorry guys, heater came on, so I had to turn that off. Right, so AC magnetic clutch relay. Again, I'm just going to enter into that. Now what this is going to do is you're actually going to hear the AC magnetic clutch on the actual AC compressor actually activate when I do this now. So 1, 2, 3. Right, so that's quite loud, and hopefully you have actually heard that. Let me see if I can shed some light on here for you guys. I'm going to try and hold that as best I can. Turn that off and back on again. Okay, fantastic. I'm really hoping that you guys did actually hear that. All right, so that's AC magnetic clutch. So that's the part of the ECU is commanding out to turn it on. So we know that works. Next up, we want to see if the signal is coming through from the actual car. So at the moment, you can see AC signal is on off. I'm going to pop over here, press my button, the orange light comes on, and AC signal then goes to on. Fantastic. Turn it off again, and AC signal then goes to off. So that is absolutely perfect. Okay, right, so what I'm going to do now is get it all up and running, make sure everything is okay. Then we're going to pop back and we're going to jump into the actual running engine test that we're going to do now. So I'll see you in a second. Right guys, so now we're back to do the test with the engine running. So I'm going to do a quick recap on what we're going to do. First of all, I'm going to move it from park to reverse, try and start it. It's not going to work because the park neutral park switch. Move it back to park, and then she's going to start. Once I've done that, I'm going to move over and I'm going to rev the engine just so you can see the drive-by wires working. We're going to go over to machine and we're going to test the oil control valve for the VVT-i, make sure that is working. We're then going to go over to the injectors and unplug them one by one to hear them misfiring. Then we're going to come back and look at the tachometer or rev counter to make sure that that signal is coming through. Then we're going to look at the coolant temp, which I think you can already see is slightly off of the needle over there because I've started already. And then we're going to talk about the diagnostics and how they work and how you do them. So first thing I want to do is put on my ear defenders to make sure I don't go deaf. Right, okay, so as I said, first thing we're going to do is we're going to move it from park into reverse. Right, so as you can see now, as soon as I turn the key, it's going to do absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And as soon as I put it back into park, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so engine runs fine, everything is cool. Each cylinder is misfiring when we remove an injector. That's exactly what we want to see. Moving on to the diagnostics now. So this is a Japanese model. Obviously it's a 1JZ-GTE VVT-i. I think they were only sold in Japan. So again, definitely a Japanese model. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the diagnostic codes. So there's going to be two ways of doing diagnostics with this particular engine. Number one is going to be with a machine. This is the ideal solution. It plugs directly into your OBD2 port that's inside your car. No fancy wiring required, no additional items. You just literally plug it in like you would a standard IS200. It gives you access to all of the data that you could possibly want. It does pick up as a Crown JZS on the actual system itself, so it should do on your side as well. And this is going to give you live data, individual details of every single code. Right. But if you're stuck without a machine and you want to do diagnostics, there is another way of doing it, okay? Now, this is going to depend also on what year your IS200 is. And what I mean by that is that basically, depending on what year you have, you might have two means of doing diagnostics, okay? On your OBD2 port, you can bridge pin 4 or 5, they're both grounds, and 13, right? So that's basically grounding out TC, which is trouble codes, right? That's the one that causes the check engine light to flash. Now, if yours is a 2001 onwards, you only have the OBD2 port, okay? So all models have the OBD2 port, but if it's 2001 onwards, only has the OBD2 port. If your IS200 is before 2001, then you should have one of these little diagnostic ports that you can see here just in front of this fuse box, which is right next to the ECU box over there. Okay, if you have this box, you can do exactly the same thing that you do inside the car on the OBD2 port. You're just going to be doing it in here instead, but you can do both sections if you're pre-2001. Right, so as I said, on the OBD2 port, you're going to bridge pin 4 or 5, they're both ground, and 13. So either 5 and 13 or 4 and 13. Doesn't make a difference which one, as long as you're grounding out 13, which is TC. In this case, I can see here I've got E1, which is in the top corner there where the wire is currently. And I've got TC, which is that one smack bang in the middle over there. You can see I only got one at the top, one at the bottom, and one in the middle. That's your TC over there. All right. So basically what happens is as I bridge this out, you'll see your check engine light goes off and then it's going to start flashing. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 46. And it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6. And then 1, 2, 62. Okay. I'm not going to go through all of them. It's basically the codes that I'm going to show you now on there, which is related to the fact that we haven't plugged the solenoid into the gearbox over there. But it gives you an idea. You bridge the codes together. So you see there, it was 4 and 6, 46, and there was 6 and 2, 62. Okay. So there's never single digit codes. Just get that out from the beginning. So they won't be, it's not 4 and 2 and 6 and 4 again. It's basically 42 and 60, 46 and 62. Okay. Right. So on our machine over here, you're going to see here that we have 7 codes altogether. So you can see the top there. Now these are all related to the solenoid. So starting from the top, you've got shift solenoid 1, 2, 3, and 4. So remember, the JZS171 is slightly different from the JZX110. The JZX110 doesn't have the 4th solenoid. You've only got 3. So just bear that in mind. And then you've got SLU, SLT, and SLN. Okay, again, so all 7 of those codes are related because the solenoid is not plugged in. Okay, those are basically the codes we get rid of when we fit the Atomu device. All right, so again, exactly what I wanted to see. We've got absolutely no codes whatsoever apart from those gearbox codes, which brings me neatly onto my next point, and that is that if you do get a check engine light with the gearbox plugged in, then there is genuinely a problem that needs resolving. Okay, so it's not just, oh, no, when you plug this in with the gearbox in, you should have absolutely no check engine light whatsoever, because as you can clearly see on there, the only codes that we've got up at the moment are related to the automatic gearbox, and that's just because I don't have an automatic gearbox with which to plug that plug into, so therefore obviously I cannot get rid of those codes on my test setup over here. But what I do want to see is I do want to see that those are the only codes that are there, because I know that's the only thing that's not plugged in. All right, so the other thing that you can do when you bridge those two terminals as well is not just reading the codes, but you can also lock the timing at 10 degrees. Okay, so if you have a look down here, let me just shed some more light on the situation here. If you have a look down here, you'll see you've got numbers. So you've got 0, 5, 10, and 15. And funnily enough, it's actually managed to stay on there. So there's a little white mark on the crank pulley. Now guys, do remember with the JZs, there are 2 marks on the crank pulley. So do make sure you get the correct one. Okay. But if you lock the time, if you bridge those 2 terminals, either in the OBD2 port or there, right? And you can basically take cylinder 1, which is that one over there. So remember, you've got the same coils on the JZS171. You can put a timing light around there, and then you can literally check your timing. So you can make sure that it's at 10 degrees. So when you bridge those terminals, it locks the timing at 10 degrees. The reason I mention this is obviously twofold. Number one, before you go ahead and start pulling the whole thing down at the front to check your timing, it's literally as simple as just putting that on, bridging those terminals, get your timing light out, bosh. If it's not at 10 degrees, then you can start doing timing, okay? Right, so the important thing else to take away is if you leave that 2 things in there, then what's gonna happen is you are going to end up with your timing locked at 10 degrees. And that's not ideal. You're gonna basically have no power low down at all, or even high up, and it's gonna be very, very bad. So please do not leave those terminals connected and go and drive the vehicle, because it's going to drive like absolute rubbish. Okay, so please, please, please make sure that you bridge those terminals to read your codes with your check engine light, check your timing if that is required. But as soon as you have done that, what you basically need to do is you need to then pull out whatever you're using, whether it be a paper clip, hair clip, piece of wire, whatever, pull that out, and then you can go and test drive the vehicle. Okay. Right, so I think that pretty much covers everything for this particular engine. Again, it's a really nice design for you guys that wanting to run with the standard management to start off with, but then are also wanting the possibility to upgrade to aftermarket later. Because obviously we've added all of the stuff in for you now. Basically the thing is, wire is cheap and it's easy to add it in now. And then when you want to go aftermarket, it's just a case of going, okay, buy the small sub harness, just plug it in and you are done. And like I said, we have those little boxes that interface with the harness as it stands now. They are designed for a 1JZ-GTE VVT-i. They are only designed for the manual versions because they are literally, I can only think of 1 or 2 ECUs that would actually cover the automatic gearbox. That's not to say that we can't do those. It just means you can't use the black box. We just have to make you your own dedicated patch harness in relation to that. And we can use obviously a Haltech Elite 2500. Or we can use a max ECU. So those are the ones that can control the automatic gearbox. So again, it's not a case of, you know, the fact that this is an auto that we are limiting. No, there are ECUs that will run the automatic gearbox. And like I said at the beginning, we can use that little box, but we'll replace it. Instead of having the JZS171 to IS200 converter, we'll change it out for the analog to IS200 converter so that we can then get all the signals to the dash as we normally would. All right, so if you guys have any questions, again, please feel free to comment down below. I'll try and get to those as much as I possibly can. Obviously, you can get to us at Facebook at Phoenix Engine Management. And again, we can get us there either by telephone. All our details are on the Facebook page as well. All right. But again, if you guys have anything that you would like to see us video, please feel free to comment down below. We try and do as many videos as we can, but you guys are the best inspiration for that. If you guys message me with problems that you have, then what I can do is then I can then make a video, provided I've got the engine, or recently coming up going to have the engine, harness, ECU, whatever package combo you need help with on an engine. And then what I'll do is I'll make a note to make a video of those individual items. So again, you guys are the real help in this. I don't know what you guys don't know. So again, feel free to comment down below. What would you like to see videos of, etc. But thanks for watching, guys. If you like this sort of stuff, obviously subscribe. It helps to get us out there so people can see exactly what we do. But yeah, also pick like, and again, if you didn't like, then dislike it. So, and let me know exactly what you disliked about it. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you again soon, and we need to get this off to the customer. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.